Alpen Pharmaceuticals in association with Higher Secondary Principals Forum.
Here we are going to learn about colloids. Now what are colloids or colloidal solutions? Colloids form a heterogeneous system in which the particle size varies from 1 to 1000 nanometer or from 10 raised to minus 9 meters to 10 raised to minus 6 meters. So we have three types of solutions we can say, or three types of systems. One is true solution, the other extreme is suspension or precipitate, and in between these two lies our colloidal system. Now colloidal system, the particle size is between 1 to 1000 nanometer, and this particle size only gives it a very unique property to the colloidal systems. Now this colloidal systems has got two terms which we will frequently use, that is disperse phase and a dispersion medium. The particles of the dispersed phase are always dispersed in very fine forms in what is called as dispersion medium. Dispersion medium is always in a larger quantity, whereas dispersed phase is always in a smaller quantity. Colloidal particles have enormous surface area per unit mass as a result of their small size. Now we will see the classification of colloids. Colloids are classified into three different categories based on three different criteria. The first criteria is physical state of dispersed phase and the dispersion medium. Second one is nature of interaction between the dispersed phase and the dispersion medium. And the third criteria of classification is type of particles of the dispersed phase. Let us see this classification in detail now. The first criteria is physical state of dispersed phase and the dispersion medium. If you see the combinations of the physical state of dispersed phase and the dispersion medium, then we can work out with 8 different possibilities. For example, in this we will see some of these. Dispersed phase is solid and dispersion medium is solid. The type of colloid is called as solid sol. Example is colored glasses and gemstones. Then we have solid dispersed phase, dispersed phase and liquid dispersion medium. This is called as solid in liquid type of colloidal system. It is called as sol, and examples are paints and solutes. Solid in gas type is termed as aerosol. Example is smoke and dust. So smoke and dust is nothing but a colloidal system. Liquid in solid type, that is gel. Okay. Jellies which we get in the market, or cheese or butter, all these are the examples of colloidal systems. Then we have liquid in liquid, which are called as emulsions. Milk is an emulsion, hair creams, vanishing creams. These are the different examples of emulsions. So like this we have got 8 different possibilities of the phases of dispersed phase and the dispersion medium. The second classification is based on the criteria of nature of interaction between the dispersed phase and the dispersion medium. Based on this, the colloids are classified into two types, lyophilic colloids and lyophobic colloids. In lyophilic colloids, the interaction between the dispersed phase and the dispersion medium is very strong, whereas lyophobic colloids, the interaction between dispersed phase and the dispersion medium is weak. Lyophilic colloids are reversible in nature. We can get our dispersed phase and dispersion medium in separated form, but lyophobic colloids are irreversible. Once they are formed, we cannot separate them. Lyophilic colloids are stable and cannot be easily coagulated, whereas lyophobic colloids are unstable and can be easily coagulated or can be easily precipitated. Lyophilic colloids can be prepared by simple mixing, whereas to prepare lyophobic colloids, special methods like chemical methods are required. Here is the classification on the third criteria, that is the nature or the type of dispersed phase particles. Based on this criteria, colloids are being classified into three types: multi-molecular colloids, macromolecular colloids and associated colloids. When do we get multi-molecular colloids? Suppose we want to prepare a gold sol, then what we will do? We will dissolve the gold particles into a suitable dispersion medium. Now when we dissolve these gold particles into a suitable dispersion medium, many gold atoms are going to come together and they are going to form an aggregate or group. This aggregate is going to multiply, that means many such aggregates are going to form and each aggregate is going to be of colloidal size, and that is how we are going to get gold sol, or similarly we can prepare sulfur sols. Second one is macromolecular colloid. Macromolecular colloids are formed by dispersed phase particles which are already in the colloidal size range. For example, if you take starch or cellulose, proteins, synthetic polymers like nylon, polythene, and if you try to dissolve them in a proper dispersion medium, the size of these particles or these molecules themselves are in the colloidal size range. Therefore, you are getting readily available colloidal solutions, and these colloidal solutions, macromolecular colloids, are quite stable as compared to the remaining two. The third one, associated colloid. There are certain substances which are going to behave as strong electrolytes at lower concentration, but as you increase their concentration, many molecules of these or many particles of these strong electrolytes are going to come together. They are going to accumulate together to form what is called as aggregate or micelle, and many such micelles are going to come together to form a colloidal solution. Each micelle is of the size of the colloidal range, that is between 1 to 1000 nanometer. Now, this micelle formation is an important parameter of associated colloids. Micelle formation does not take place at any concentration. The concentration above which micelle formation takes place is called as critical micelle concentration or CMC. As well as this micelle formation takes place above a particular temperature only, and the temperature above which this micelle formation takes place is called as Kraft temperature. So, what are the examples of associated colloids? Soap solution and detergent solution are the examples of associated colloids. So, for soaps, CMC, that is critical micelle concentration, is between 10⁻⁴ to 10⁻³ moles per liter. Let us see now the mechanism of micelle formation. We will take the example of soap solution. Soap is nothing but sodium stearate. This sodium stearate, when dissolved in water, it is going to dissociate into two ions, Na plus ions and RCOO minus ions. This RCOO minus ion is called as stearate ion, and it consists of two parts. The long chain hydrocarbon, which is non-polar, that is R, and this COO minus group, which is polar. Non-polar hydrocarbon chain is called as non-polar tail, whereas polar COO minus group is called as polar head of the soap ion, that is stearate ion. So, this is what I was talking about. Okay, this is a stearate ion, can be depicted pictorially. This is that COO minus group, which is the hydrophilic head, and this is the non-polar hydrophobic tail. This is repellent of water, whereas this is attracting to water. Understood? So, this is the stearate ion, pictorial form of the stearate ion, and henceforth we are going to deal with this pictorial form only. So, when these stearate ions are formed in water, how they are aligned? They are aligned in water like this. The polar head is towards the water because water is also polar. So, polar head of stearate ion is going to be towards water, and the tail part, which is non-polar, is going to go away from the surface of water. So, in water the arrangement of soap ions or stearate ions is like this. Now, suppose you are having an organic impurity or an oil drop, suppose, then how these stearate ions are going to align to an organic impurity. See, in the center we will consider there is an organic impurity. So, how these stearate ions are going to get adhered? See, the tail part, which is non-polar, is going to stick to the organic impurity, and the head part, which is polar or hydrophilic in nature, it will be in the periphery. So, this is how the micelle is going to form. This is micelle formation. Many such stearate ions are going to get adhered or aligned like this. In one particular micelle you can find that there are 100 ions of stearate. Okay. So, this is how the adherence is going to take place to an organic impurity. Now, we will see the emulsifying and rinsing or washing action or cleansing action of soap. This is an oil drop or an organic impurity, and when it is dipped in soap solution, the non-polar tail part is going to get attached to the organic impurity and it is going to form a micelle like this. And when you are rinsing it with water, what is going to happen? The water is going to attract this head part, it is going to pull this head part, and when the head part is pulled, automatically tail is also going to be pulled, and then also the organic impurity also will be pulled away and cleansing action or emulsification is going to occur. How colloids are prepared? Colloids are prepared by chemical methods. We can make use of different reactions like double decomposition, oxidation, reduction, hydrolysis, etc. for the preparation of colloids. For example, in this case, arsenium sulphide is prepared from arsenic oxide by double decomposition. Sulfur sol is prepared from sulfur dioxide by oxidation. Gold sol is prepared from chloride of gold by reduction, and ferric hydroxyl sol is prepared from ferric chloride by what is called as hydrolysis reaction. This is another important method for the preparation of colloids. Suppose you want to prepare a gold sol, or you want to prepare a platinum sol or a silver sol, then this method, which is called as electrical disintegration or Bradig's arc method, is used. Now, suppose you want to prepare a platinum sol, then what you are going to do? You are going to take two platinum electrodes and connect them to the external source of electricity. In this particular beaker, there is a suitable dispersion medium, and this suitable dispersion medium is given a chilling effect from outside. So, when the electricity is supplied to both these platinum electrodes, the heat will be generated and the electric arc will be struck here somewhere, and this electric arc which is struck is going to produce large amount of heat. This heat is going to vaporize these electrodes and the particles will come inside the dispersion medium. So, first dispersion is going to occur, and as soon as they come into the dispersion medium, the chilling effect from outside is going to cause the condensation, and we are going to get a particular metal sol. If you want to prepare a gold sol, then what you will have to do? You will have to take both these electrodes made up of gold, one of the very important methods of preparation of colloids. The third method for the preparation of colloids is peptization. What is peptization? Peptization is the conversion of freshly prepared precipitate into a colloidal solution in a suitable dispersion medium, and very importantly in the presence of a suitable electrolyte. The electrolyte used for this purpose is known as peptizing agent. Now, what is happening during peptization? During peptization, the precipitate molecule is going to adsorb a suitable electrolytic ion on itself, and when it adsorbs an electrolytic ion on itself, it itself is going to become charged. As a result, the precipitate particle is going to break into a colloidal solution. Once colloids are prepared, naturally the second phase is they have to be purified. Now, how we can define purification of colloids? Remember all of you, You cannot purify colloids 100%. That means we cannot remove 100% impurities from a colloid. Certain minimum amount of impurities are to be present in the colloid in order to avoid their precipitation. So, how we will define this colloidal solution purification? The process used for reducing the amount of impurities. We have to reduce the impurities and not totally root out them. Reducing the amount of impurities in colloidal solution to a requisite minimum, some amount should be present, is known as purification of colloids. So, there are three different methods in which we can carry out purification of colloids. They are dialysis, electrodialysis and ultrafiltration. Let us see each one of these in detail. See, this is the dialysis. Now, what is dialysis? For dialysis, we are taking this apparatus which is called as a dialyzer. In dialysis, the electrolytic impurities, which are also called as crystalloid, are removed to a requisite minimum from the colloidal solution by the process of diffusion. Okay. So, for that we are putting the colloidal solution along with the impurities in a suitable bag which is made up of semi-permeable membrane. Semi-permeable membrane is going to allow to pass through it only smaller particles, and larger colloidal particles are going to remain inside this bag. So, there is a continuous current of water flowing in and out, and due to this current of water, the crystalloid impurities are going to get washed away along with the water through this semi-permeable membrane. The process of dialysis that we have seen in the previous slide is quite slow, and therefore, some modification is made in case of dialysis. What is the modification which is made here? Yes, electrodes are connected in the dialyzer. Okay. So, external electric field is applied. So, when the external electric field is applied to a dialyzer, the process becomes electrodialysis. Now, the same thing which we have seen in the earlier slide is taking place here, but the only advantage of electrodialysis over dialysis is that electrodialysis is slightly faster than dialysis. Ultrafiltration, this is actually the filtration process that we carry out using a funnel. But here the simple coarse filter paper, if we take normal filter papers, then there is possibility that along with the impurities, colloidal particles also will pass through the pores of filter paper. So, we will have to treat the filter papers. How you are going to treat the filter paper? First, you will have to impregnate your the simple filter papers, okay, into a colloidal solution. So, dip the filter paper, ordinary filter paper, into a colloidal solution. This colloidal solution is nothing but 4% solution of nitrocellulose in a mixture of alcohol and ether. Once the impregnation is done, it is hardened with formaldehyde, and once it is hardened with formaldehyde, it is dried, and that filter paper is used for ultrafiltration. But ultrafiltration is again a slow process. To make it faster, the suction is applied. So, these are the three different methods of purification of colloids. Let us now come to a unique part of this chapter, and that is the unique properties of the colloidal solution. We have already discussed that due to the particle size of the colloids, that is between 1 to 1000 nanometers, there are certain properties of colloids which are unique in themselves and which are shown only by the colloidal solutions. Now, which are these colloidal properties that we are going to see? The first one is Tyndall effect, then color, Brownian movement, charge on colloidal particles, coagulation or precipitation, colligative properties and electrophoresis. So, let us see one by one in detail. Tyndall effect. See this picture on the right hand side, the light coming out from the window pane on a sunny day. This is how it looks inside the house, isn't it? You are going to get a bluish grey opalescence. Okay, this is what we can see many a times. This is nothing but Tyndall effect. Okay. So, now what is this Tyndall effect? See, when the light is passed through the colloidal solution and if it is viewed through an electron microscope at a angle right angle to the passage of light, see where the observer is perpendicular to the passage of light, then the observer finds a bluish cone inside the colloidal solution. There is a bluish opalescence over here, this portion. This is called as Tyndall cone and the effect is called as Tyndall effect. Now, Tyndall effect is observed due to the scattering of light in all the directions by the colloidal particle. When will the Tyndall effect observed? Tyndall effect can be observed only under two conditions. First one is the size of the particles and the wavelength of the light used should not differ greatly. Okay, they should be almost of the same magnitude. Second condition is refractive indices of the disperse phase and dispersion medium should vary greatly. That means there should be large difference between the RI's values of disperse phase and the dispersion medium. Now, color of the colloidal solution depends on many factors. It depends upon the size of the colloidal particles, it depends upon the wavelength of the light which is used. It also depends upon the way in which the observer sees the light, whether he observes the transmitted light or he observes the reflected light. So, there are some examples that I have taken over here. Mixture of milk and water appears blue when viewed by the reflected light. But if the same mixture is observed by transmitted light, it appears red in color. So, here which factor is affecting the way in which the observer sees the light? Finest gold sol is red in color and as the size of the gold particle increases, it appears purple. Then it appears blue with a slightly greater size and finally, if you increase the slight little more, it will appear golden in color. So, size of the particle also matters a lot to decide the color of the colloidal solution. Brownian movement. What is this Brownian movement? See, if you see the colloidal solution through an ultra microscope, then throughout its field of view, you will find that each particle is having a zigzag continuous motion and this continuous zigzag motion of each colloidal particle is termed as Brownian movement. The motion is independent of the nature of colloid, but it depends on the size of the particle and viscosity of the solution. If the viscosity of the solution is less, then you will find that Brownian movement is to a greater extent. Now, Brownian movement is important because it gives stirring effect to the colloidal solution and hence it prevents it from settling down or precipitating. So, this is how the Brownian movement is continuous zigzag motion of colloidal particles. Now, why at all this Brownian movement should take place? Because particles of colloids are continuously colliding with the particles of the dispersion medium and this is giving us this fashion of movement. Charge on the colloidal particles. Remember all of you, each colloidal solution will be charged. It will be either positively charged or it will be negatively charged. In a given colloid, all the particles of the colloidal solution will have either charge. Both the charges will not be present in a single colloidal solution. Accordingly, colloidal particles or colloidal solutions are classified into two types, positively charged solution and negatively charged solutions or sols. What are positively charged sols? Hydrated metallic oxides are the examples, then basic dyes like methylene blue, hemoglobin is an example of positively charged sol, oxides of titanium are also the examples of positively charged sol. In case of negatively charged sols, metal sols are all negatively charged, metal sulfides are also negatively charged, acid dye stuff like Congo red, then sols of starch, gum, gelatin forms the negatively charged sol. Why at all or how a colloidal particle achieves a particular charge? It depends also in the manner in which we are carrying out the addition of dispersed phase with the dispersion medium. For example, here we are taking an example of addition of silver nitrate to potassium iodide solution. Now, when silver nitrate is added drop by drop to the potassium iodide solution, it is going to form the precipitate of silver iodide. This precipitate it is going to form. Then this silver iodide precipitate particles are going to selectively adsorb negative iodide ion on their surface and peptization is going to occur. So, naturally the colloidal particle is going to get a negative charge. So, it forms a negatively charged sol. On the other hand, if you reverse, if you keep on adding potassium iodide drop by drop into silver nitrate solution, again you are going to get AgI as a precipitate, and then this AgI is going to selectively adsorb silver ions from the electrolyte and the charge on the sol is going to become positive. So, like this, due to the preferential adsorption of one of the electrolytic ions on the surface of the colloidal solution, the colloidal particles get charge. In this case, it has already acquired negative charge. Now, once it has acquired negative charge, this layer of iodide ions is going to attract the layer of counter ions, that is positive ion on itself. So, now there is formation of two layers on the surface of the colloidal particles. Similarly, positively charged silver iodide sol, this is the first layer on the colloidal particle and this layer is going to attract its counter ion layer. So, like this there are two layers over one another on the silver iodide sol. So, here since two layers of the opposite charge are very much close to each other, the potential difference will be developed between the two layers. Here also the potential difference will be developed between the two layers. This layer, the first layer which is present directly on the colloidal surface is called as fixed layer and it is immobile, whereas the second layer is called as diffused layer and it is mobile. And the potential difference which is developed between these two layers is called as electrokinetic potential, or it is also called as zeta potential. All of you, charge is very much essential because charge gives stability to the colloidal solution. The next property is electrophoresis. Now, electrophoresis is a proof that colloidal particles have charge. Now, what is done in electrophoresis? See, this is a U-tube apparatus in which at the end of this U-tube the two electrodes are suspended which are platinum electrodes and they are connected to the two terminals of the external source of electricity, and there is a colloidal particle which is charged either positive or negative. Now, here in this case when the external electric field is applied, the particles are going to go or they are going to move towards oppositely charged electrodes. Suppose you are taking a negatively charged colloidal solution, then the particles are going to move towards positively charged electrode. If you are taking positively charged solution, then all the particles will move towards the negatively charged electrode. This is what is called as electrophoresis. Now, coagulation or precipitation. Now, what is this coagulation? Coagulation is nothing but destruction of colloidal solution. Conversion of colloidal solution into a precipitate or into a suspension is called as coagulation. Coagulation is also termed as precipitation, it is also termed as flocculation. The process of settling down of colloidal particles is called as coagulation or precipitation of the sol. Now, what are the different ways in which we can carry out precipitation of the sol? The first way, see, we have already studied in the past in our presentation that lyophobic colloids are very easy to get coagulated, lyophilic are stable and very difficult to get coagulated. So, first we shall see in how many different ways we can carry out precipitation or coagulation of lyophobic colloids. The first one is carry out electrophoresis. Just now we have seen what is electrophoresis, movement of colloidal particles towards oppositely charged electrodes. They were going towards the oppositely charged electrode and settling on the surface of the platinum. That is what is neutralization of charge is occurring and precipitation is taking place during electrophoresis. Second method is by mixing two oppositely charged sol. For example, if you are having positively charged ferric hydroxide sol and you are adding equal amount of negatively charged arsenic sulfide sol, what is going to happen? Positive charge of one colloidal particle will be neutralized by the negative charge of another colloidal particle and the charge will be destroyed and coagulation will occur. Third one is boiling. See, when you excessively boil a colloid, what is going to happen? The adsorbed layer on the colloidal particle which is responsible for its charge, it will get reduced, and when the charge is getting reduced, we are actually converting a colloid into a precipitate. So, boiling causes coagulation. Fourth method is by persistent dialysis. In dialysis what we are doing? We are passing the water current continuously and through semi-permeable membrane crystalloids are washed away with water. So, if you carry out this dialysis for a long time, all the impurities from the from that colloidal solution will pass through the semi-permeable membrane and 100% purification will occur. 100% purification is nothing but coagulation. Last one, by addition of excess of electrolyte. If you add excess of electrolyte, what is going to happen? See, suppose you are having a positively charged electrolyte and you are adding excess of potassium iodide, you are having positively charged colloidal solution and you are adding excess of electrolyte potassium iodide. This positively charged sol or colloidal solution is going to attract more and more counter ion, that is iodide ion on itself, and it is going to neutralize the positive charge on itself. So, like this, addition of excess of electrolyte also can cause coagulation of lyophobic salts. Now, there is a concept of what is called as coagulating ion or flocculating ion. Now, what is this flocculating ion? Flocculating ion is the ion which is responsible for neutralizing the charge of the colloidal solution. There is a rule which governs the flocculating power of different ions, which is called as Hardy-Schulze rule. What does the Hardy-Schulze rule say? Greater the valence of the flocculating ion added, greater is its power to cause precipitation. Now, see, suppose you are having positively charged colloidal particle, you can carry out its flocculation or coagulation by adding negatively charged ion. Similarly, if you are having negatively charged colloidal solution, you can carry out its flocculation by adding positively charged ion, isn't it? So, here what we are doing? We are adding positively charged ions in order to carry out flocculation of negatively charged sol, and we are adding negatively charged ions in order to carry flocculation of positively charged sol. Now, what is going to happen? There are choices of ions now. For positive ions, greater is the valence, greater will be the power to flocculate. So, out of Al plus 3, Ba plus 2 and Na plus 1, Al plus 3, since its valence is greater, it will have greater power to carry out the flocculation of negatively charged sol. Similarly, amongst these negative ions, this cyanide ion, which is a complex ion, ferric cyanide ion, is going to cause greater coagulation or greater flocculation because of its higher valence or greater valence. So, greater is the valence, greater is the flocculating power of the ion is decided by what is called as Hardy-Schulze rule. So, these were the examples of coagulation of lyophobic colloidal particles. Now, we are going to see the coagulation of lyophilic salts. Now, we know that lyophilic salts are already stable and therefore, they are very difficult to coagulate or it is difficult to carry out their precipitation. See, there are two factors which are responsible for the stability of lyophilic salts. One is the charge and the second one is solvation. So, if you disturb the charge and the solvation, automatically the coagulation of lyophilic salts is going to occur. So, what are we going to do? We are going to disturb these two factors. How it is disturbed? They are disturbed in two ways. It is by adding an electrolyte. By adding an electrolyte, we are disturbing the charge associated with the lyophilic colloid. And second method is by adding a suitable solvent. What are we doing? We are disturbing the solvation around the lyophilic particles, and thus we can carry out the coagulation of lyophilic salts. Although they are difficult, lyophobic salts are easy to coagulate. There is a concept of something called as protective colloids. To protect lyophobic colloids, sometimes lyophilic colloids are added. We know that lyophilic salts are more stable than lyophobic salts. This is due to the fact that lyophilic colloids are extensively solvated. So, sometimes lyophilic colloids have unique property of protecting lyophobic colloids. When a lyophilic sol is added to the lyophobic sol, the lyophilic particles form a layer around the lyophobic particles and thus protect the lyophobic particles from electrolyte. So, such lyophilic colloids which are used to protect the lyophobic colloids from coagulation are called as protective colloids. Now, let us go ahead with the next colloidal system, that is emulsions. What are emulsions? Emulsions are liquid in liquid type of colloidal solutions, and usually emulsions are made by mixing two immiscible or two partially miscible liquids. These emulsions are classified into two types: oil dispersed in water or OW type, wherein oil is a dispersed phase and water is a dispersion medium. The second category is water dispersed in oil or WO type, wherein water is a dispersed phase and oil is a dispersion medium. So, here we will see OW type first. Examples are milk and vanishing cream, whereas water in oil type examples are butter and hair creams. Okay. So, both these types of colloids usually are unstable. Okay, so I will give you a simple example. You take water and oil, mix it, you will find turbidity for some time, isn't it? That turbidity which you get is nothing but an emulsion. But if you keep it for standing for over a period of time, you will find that the two layers of oil and water separate. That means the colloids or the emulsions are not stable, the two phases get separated after some time. Now, in order to make the emulsion stable, we add something called as emulsifying agents. What these emulsifying agents are going to do? They are going to form a thin interface between the dispersed phase and the dispersion medium, and the time of separation will be delayed. That means they are going to stabilize the emulsion. So, what are the different types of emulsifying agents that we can add? For oil dispersed in water type of emulsion, proteins, gums or soap solutions are used as an emulsifying agent, whereas for water dispersed in oil type of emulsions, heavy metal salts of fatty acids, long chain alcohols and lamp black are used as emulsifying agents. So, students, in this particular chapter we have dealt with the different surface phenomenon. This surface phenomenon has got wide applications in analytical industry as well as in research. So, I wish that you have learned and you will learn out of this chapter, and you are going to see these applications, the examples that we have seen from this chapter in your day-to-day life, keeping your eye open. All the very best for your upcoming endeavors, all of you. Thank you very much.
Prudent Scholars, powered by Lupin Pharmaceuticals.